Step right up and join the most vibrant circus community in the world, circustalk.com. This is In Center Ring. I'm your host, Jonathan Lee Iverson. Graced with an undisputed genius, she is an athletic marvel who would ascend to world champion status, even legend. Through trial and triumph, she is an unstoppable force with an indomitable spirit. In Center Ring presents Shenea Stiletto Booth. Here you've had this remarkable career. And it's almost kind of like it's unstoppable, it's unusual. And you were in a wonderful panel discussion recently that has caught fire on the internet, as far as I'm concerned. It was moderated by the wonderful Veronica Blair. It's so easy when you're not in other people's skin to not know. And I was just blown away by what you ladies were talking about, the challenges, the body shaming, the wardrobe that's never conducive to your beautiful black skin, being almost like a unicorn in every cast, the sly remarks, the harassment, all those things that not just as a woman, but as a black woman, you have to contend with. Despite the championships and the Hall of Fame credentials, the things you still have to endure. Because I don't want people going away here being fooled. Like, it's just been smooth sailing. She just worked hard and it was the American dream. But it also is about that relentless spirit in spite of. You're going to be so good at this that in spite of all of that, in spite of the racism and the sexism and all the other isms and whatever, you're going to be regarded with respect. What has that part of your journey been like? Please.
That panel was very powerful, and it's been a very interesting road. It's been one of the things that has almost got me out of this journey many times, where I might not have continued to be a circus performer because the level of harassment and racism and discrimination has been so deep and so extreme so many times. And I love that you say that, so that people don't think that it's just glitz and glam and all these things, and that they see, again, she's had so much opportunity. It must not really be that bad for someone like her, for a woman of color, because I get that placating all the time when I try to bring up this conversation in circus. This is what's happening. It's not that you didn't work hard because you're working yourself to death, which I have overworked myself because of these systems that we have in place so many times to my own personal detriment that I felt like maybe I couldn't even perform again, because I've just, I've worked myself to death because of how I've been treated by a director, forced into overworking when and told I wasn't going to keep the job, and thinking, why is this happening to me? Why is there this hyper focus on me when I'm already doing my job? And being told that I do need to reach these ridiculous levels in order to stay there, and the strain, mental strain, the psychological strain, the physical strain, and getting injured, and getting sick, working myself until I'm sick. I want people to understand how much suffering has gone on behind the scenes for a woman of color like me performing in circus, performing in these spaces that are not made for us, that we stick out in, that have nothing familiar there for us, that we're consistently told that we're different. When you're every single day, just within all of your life, when you're always being called out for being different all the time, it has. Everything comes back to that. Everything comes back to black, right? Every little thing that you do comes back.
That is a T-shirt. Everything comes back to black.
And thank God for myself coming from the family that I have, where our default setting is very light and airy and smiley. Everybody, whenever they see me and they see me as a very non-serious person on the surface, they say, well, if you met my mom and my dad, it would all make sense, because they are, I can't even smile more than my mom and my dad. They smile and laugh. Yeah, like 10 times more than I do. And so I'm grateful for that, because I don't know how I would have made it through up until this point if I didn't have that kind of like natural default setting of being lighter, of being more smiley, of being, you know, more prone to laughter than to despair, and definitely finding different tools and things in order to navigate this experience. I want to talk about my last very pronounced experience with that, and that was with Cirque du Soleil. And unfortunately, it was such a negative experience. I was the first Black woman to play their very iconic character known as the Promise in their touring show Verakai. I was one of the main characters, and I was the hand balancing act, the solo hand balancing act. And I had been dreaming about doing that role for like over a decade. My partner that I worked with, he's like, eventually you're going to go solo, and you are going to be the Promise. Look at you go, you know. So I was just overjoyed when I got that role, and you know, of course, because again, it's usually a role that's coveted by Eastern Europeans. I was in love, and still am in love with with Olga Pekenko, who originated the role. I've known her for years, and she was just everything to me, starting from Kidam, and then when she did Verakai, and so I've always idolized her, and so getting the chance, I felt like yes. So I got the role. It started out very choppy. You know, everything just the discrimination and things like that started kind of right away. I was told that my resume was quite limited, actually, when I was negotiating for the role. Yes. Oh, yes. And I had a very short amount of time to be able to do the role. Usually people have 2 months to do the role before they have to go on stage. Before, people used to have 6 to 8 months for creation. I was initially offered 8 days to be an emergency replacement, to go from absolutely nothing to being on stage in 8 days. Wow. Yeah. It was, and I first even said no, because I just felt like, okay, no. 8 days, like, oh my gosh, you know, and I knew it was going to be very difficult. And I thought to myself, oof, okay, well, I mean, this opportunity, I might not get this opportunity again, because, you know, we know how specific it is. I mean, this is all these things still are very precious.
Just say no to history too, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was multifaceted. There were so many dimensions to why I needed to say yes to this, no matter what. I've always believed that showing up is enough. And me on my, you know, small level of something, you know, and feeling what that feels like to shake things up, to shake up environments, and to get into a space where you're like, oh yes, you can at least say that somebody was there. Someone did do it. Somebody was there. No matter what you say about how you felt it went or any of those things, that means something. That means a lot. And it was interesting coming to that space. You know, nothing was just available for me to get into that role quick enough, because you know, they'd never had a brown promise. So, you know, they didn't have the costuming right. They couldn't figure out how to get it right. They struggled with the makeup. They couldn't do it right. People didn't like it. People thought I was wearing whiteface at one point. They were very offended. It brought up a lot of things for people and for me, because then I'm just sitting there kind of like the guinea pig, you know, being like, and now go out there in this. Oh, okay, that's not working. Everybody hates that. Now go out there in that and be excellent. Ooh, nobody likes it? Oh God, we didn't do it right. Okay, and now we're gonna do it this way, you know, and we don't have a lot of time. It's difficult even when you have a lot of time, the pressure. And, you know, from the beginning, I was, you know, kind of treated like a like a nightclub act. They were surprised that I knew who Olga Pekenko was, who was the originator of the role. They were surprised that I even knew what Verakai was. They were asking if it was my first time in Montreal, even though I'd been working for Cirque du Soleil on and off up to that point for almost 10 years. They were surprised that I had ever seen the show Verakai. And I was consistently just told that the role was not really me. I didn't have the right look for the role, that it wasn't right for the role. I was told that my presence on stage was offensive to the role, they were basically, calling me kind of like overly sensualized or sexualized, which had absolutely, I was bringing none of that to this role.
It's Maya Angelou's poetry. Does my sassiness offend you? I mean, you may not have, you don't have to. You're a Black woman.
Just be
you
there.
Just walk in the room and it's curves and color, and all of a sudden people are offended.
We need to dump her down. And so the whole thing became about watering me down to make me right for the stage. So that was my consistent communication, that they needed to strip away all of this extra stuff that I was coming to the stage with, which was so offensive, to be able to allow me to hopefully securely perform the role, the most, blanketed, downgraded way that I potentially could, so that it fit, that narrative. The end of my experience there, because it was just so disgraceful, the way that they treated me, the way that things happened. Eventually, when I was in that role, if anyone's hip to, Cirque, there's this thing called President's Week, and it's like the most important week if you get a chance to perform during that week, because a lot of the big players in Cirque du Soleil come and watch the show, and usually the creators of the show come and see the show and see what is the show like now. And the director felt that me performing in the role was so subpar, in his words, that he did not want to see the creator. He didn't want the creator of that role to see me perform the show during President's Week. So he replaced me with a Spanish breakdancer to do limited versions of my role, but took out one of the most iconic parts of that show, Verakai, which is the hand balancing part, so that we would not degrade the character and quality of Verakai for the creator of the show.
Wow, we could be here for 3 more episodes, because that's just fascinating, because these stories are so plenteous. There's so many people with them, and you hear it from different corners all the time, but most particularly with Black performers, namely Black female performers. You get out there. I mean, you also mentioned that during the panel discussion that was presented by Circus Talk, that you recently had a situation in China, and this really ties into what I always have to remind people, that anti-Blackness is a global phenomenon.
This conversation is international and it's worldwide, and we need to keep the conversation very open and very wide, because we're all traveling all over the world. We're not just traveling in America. There's a lot of great feats that we've accomplished in America in terms of inclusivity and diversity, and those are great, but they are drops in the bucket when it comes to other spaces in the world that maybe we're at a 50, they're at a 5 or a 10, maybe even less than that. And I was performing at the Venetian Macau, and these are stories that, again, I keep saying I have so many stories. I'm using the bigger highlights. Of course, Cirque was a big one because that was a huge historic role. But things like that have been happening to me my entire competitive career and my entire circus career. I've been having those same comments and things and being cast aside for all of this work that I'm getting, but still being treated like that. So within the jobs that I get. So in Macau, when I arrived to that contract, I was told to not get comfortable, because they don't keep the performers of color that long. So don't expect to do a long-term contract there.
They're very insistent on that over there. I noticed that in their casting calls, they're not shy about that. They want white, and they'll say it.
And people say these things to my face.
Yeah.
They're not shy. And I was telling someone I was interviewing the other day that these are a lot of the situations I've had have not been just like so outwardly hostile. People are just casually saying these things to me. Like when they said, don't get comfortable here because they don't keep the performers of color that long here. I mean, my heart, everything could have just dropped. It was so difficult to get that job. And it's a place that you can go and stay for a couple of years. And I was happy to do that and to stay there. I was there for about a year. I pushed it a bit and it worked. So I was able to get myself and keep myself there longer. But it's when they say these really awful, terrible things, it's so casual. It's not like this, this scary, crazy thing where, people are like, not always, sometimes it is. So I don't want to minimize that because I've had some encounters that are incredibly bold and hateful and hurtful and evil and very much in my face and threatening, where I felt incredibly scared for my safety many times. Especially being in the world alone as a small Black woman, which I remind people I am that when they're telling me, well, you should have said this and you should have done that.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm 5 feet.
The experience is different being a very tiny person of color.
And you're in that by yourself with nobody to and I think that's even worse because, of course, in most of those contracts, you're the only one. And it's like you have no friends. You have no friends. It is so cruel. And I'm sure there are going to be Black people who watch this who are in the corporate world, who are in other corners of the performing arts, who are all going to do a collective sigh.
Yes.
You just can't go and you can't just go and be excellent and be who you are and just have your career and live. You just can't live. You just the devil's got to always be somewhere, and only to your own comfort. I mean, because I have no right to, tell you how you tell that story or what have you. But if you feel comfortable addressing that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me, Jonathan, and for opening the space for that because it's something incredibly important. I was raped and molested by my acrobatic gymnastics coach, my only American coach, which I have always found fascinating because people that are American think it was my European coaches, and my European coaches say, "Oh, absolutely not! Couldn't have been us. It was definitely you." So
they were like, "No, we know who you. No, we know y'all."
You know how Americans roll. Like, we do the other things, but you're funny around sex.
We may beat those kids, but we're not sleeping with them.
That's what they all tell me, just like that. It's very real, and they're like, but that's the truth. So I and me, along with multiple teammates, my coach, abuser David Reiakvam, was a serial pedophile in acrobatic gymnastics for nearly 2 decades before he was brought to justice. We still don't even know the extent of his abuses, how many victims. There were only 2 of us that came forward in order to testify. This is before Nassar. This is before everything got penetrated within USA Gymnastics, and this entire thing came to be, all the darkness that they have been able to keep under wraps for so long. USA Gymnastics knew that my coach was a pedophile, but instead they used their own system of non-reporting. So they had a system in place for many, many years where if there was a violent crime or a sex crime reported against a coach or a choreographer or anybody within the system, that unless the victim and the victim's parents signed an affidavit, then they felt like their hands, they didn't have to report it to the authorities or do anything. So if it was reported by someone else, which it usually would, because as anybody that's an advocate or within this world knows, it usually takes a minimum of a decade before anyone comes out about their abuse. Minimum of a decade.
Yeah.
So it's a very long time, And even if they've maybe told one person, they won't tell anybody else. So they had this ridiculous thing in place where they were basically just having all these pedophile criminals just running around. And so what they would do is, just like with the Catholic Church, they would just let you go to another gym. There would be no record of your abuses against those children at the other gym. It would not follow you to the next gym. You could just go over, start over. become very popular again. They had a file of you that they hid in the back room that nobody was privy to, and they would just keep giving you positions. So my coach, even after he was found out, even after he was exposed, he was still able to come to world championships where I competed. I did not say anything at that time. He was being exposed for raping my teammates, and no one reported him to the authorities. It took me another 10 years when the authorities showed up to me, because he was able to stay in and around the sport for so long, and I was, dealing with all that trauma all those years, and had not gone to the authorities. And I got in, it was a blessing because it was right under the statute. Had it been a little bit longer, it wouldn't have happened. But of course, he was able to stay in and around the sport throughout that entire time. Coach, people knew about him. They knew what he was doing. They knew what he was capable of. And he had never stopped. So he had more victims. So they came to me, because they said, a lot of roads point to you. I lived with them. So what he would do is he would come in before my practice and rape me, and then go take a shower, and then I would go to gym. And he was a dentist at the time as well, when he owned his gym with my other coach, Sherry. And so I lived with both of them. I was entrusted to them. I knew them since I was 8 years old. They were very good friends with my first coach, Nikolai Mihov. And so I had a very long history with them. It was like another parent for me. And me and my sister had been going in and around their house for years. My parents, there was, we were so comfortable with them. And so it was such a violation of trust. And come to find out that, that's how they were doing it. They were inviting all of us little girls down to do upper level training, and she was acting like she had no idea what was going on, and he just had whatever he needed just right there, just down the hall. He was committing all these horrific crimes and committing them elsewhere in his dental practice and doing all sorts of things, and no one was ever holding this man accountable. And I say that because he had such white privilege. And this ended up coming into play when we eventually had the trial. He was facing 20 years to 50 years in prison. The charges against him were astronomical. I ended up going undercover with the police to secure a confession from him, which I think was one of the most terrifying things I've done in my entire life. And I always remind everybody that nothing could be scarier. I had to call him out of the blue. So I got coached by the detectives, and he had stalked me on and off into my adulthood. So a lot of us were very brainwashed by him. He was still stalking us until we were like young women, because the police didn't come to me until I was about 24. And so he was still in and around, but I hadn't spoken to him, I think, in about 2 years at that point, maybe even 3. And so, when they said, we're just going to call him, I thought, I can't even imagine that. What am I supposed to say to him? And they said, just talk to him like you would. Just talk to him like you would. And so I spoke to him for about an hour. I had the detectives there putting pieces of paper in front of me, telling me what I needed to say, because you need to get certain things on record or else they can't use it to arrest them. So it was, he said everything that they needed him to say. It was about an hour conversation, and and then our trial was, we were able to move forward. I still to this day just know that at any point some of that conversation could have gone wrong with with speaking to him in that way, or him feeling, he never felt tipped off that I was the police. Never. It was just, and God bless, but it was, so then, there was continuances with the trial. He had a very good lawyer, because he came from money. Like I said, he was very privileged. No one wanted to hold this man accountable. All these people within USA Gymnastics have known about this man raping and molesting kids for 20 years. And unless we ended up doing all of that, he'd still be there. And even now we know that post his arrest and when he went to prison. So I want to take it back to the trial, because we were supposed to have a trial. But the very lazy district attorney came to me and said, David Reiakvam, he's white, he's a doctor, He's very attractive. He's very charismatic, and it's going to be very difficult for a jury of his peers to convict him in Riverside, California. So we're just going to give him a plea deal. We're just going to give him a plea deal, and he's going to register as a sex offender, of course, for the rest of his life. He's going to lose his medical license, but he ended up doing a lot less prison time. He was supposed to serve minimum 15 years. He ended up serving, he got 2 years, and he got out in 1.
Wow. He could do all that. The whole community knows about it. As I've always said, in the words of the great Dr. Claude Anderson, racism is a team sport. And the fact that you have people just covering for him, that is something just insane. That is such a cruel injustice. And, and this person just basically goes on with his life. Your level of strength and optimism is really, I would say it's quite remarkable, but again, everything comes back to Black. It's very Black of you.
Very Black of me.
Because, what else do we have, right? Yeah. If you don't laugh, if you probably weren't that excellent, you'd probably be in a loony bin somewhere. That's really what it is. So So in light of that, because I think we should wind this down to a very happy note, something very cheerful. I love your optimism. I love your spirit. I love the fact that, you have that great spirit of so many dynamic Black women of old and even now who, despite the world, despite all this stuff that is just heaped upon your shoulder, you continue to rise. Listen, your record, despite these people with the funny thing about your resume, your record speaks for itself. And I think it is more of a tribute to, more so than your obvious skill and ability, it's really a tribute, a triumph of the soul, of actually, in spite of it all. And going from that young, and you're still really young. To have all of that from then on and to still manage to be who you are and to still thrive in spite of, how very Black of you. It's like, wow.
People are amazing.
Yeah,
Black people are amazing.
They are. Aren't we though? Aren't we just magical? It's like, wow. How do they do? I think they do this stuff just to see. Like, let's see what else.
What else? Smile at? What else are they going to persevere through and be more joyful and on beat and look so good?
Right. So I want to know. We've been in this pandemic. We've been dealing with the social injustice uprisings and things like that. I'd love to hear your vision for yourself going forward, because we're going to be permitted to go out and play again, despite the fact that you're in California where, we have cases rising again. I'm in Florida, so, it could be worse. So, I have to suffer with a smile here. I'm really interested in hearing about, what are you putting together? What's your next move? What do you foresee for yourself coming out of this?
Oh, wow. It's like some things I don't, to put it in the words of John Lewis, who we just lost, I intend to continue to get into good trouble.
I love that.
I intend to do more and more and more of that. And how that will continue to show up for me, not particularly sure, but I want to continue to expand in all ways. where I am contributing in good ways to all of these new conversations that have come into place. I want to contribute in terms of having a calling and not just a career. I want to continue to go deep with the things that I put out into the world, and to make sure that I think radical truth is always at the forefront of everything that I am doing and putting out into the world, and speaking up in as many spaces as I can, and creating platforms that I feel ask me the questions that I want to be asked and represent myself in the way that I want to be represented. I think it's amazing to see everyone doing that, and I think that that's very important right now. It's more important to me than I ever really imagined in giving voice to myself. Which, I'm usually a silent performer. We're not usually talking on stage. People are like, we haven't heard her speak much, but now that we've heard her speak, she doesn't stop talking. So, there is something that has transformed within me, that has evolved into so many different things. And at a time in my life that I didn't think that it would. I thought, I am still quite young, and I eventually too, and maybe this is going to be something that spirals into that too. I eventually really love to have a family. I need to eventually, or I would like to eventually have some babies, and that is high on my list whenever that God willing, if that happens in the future in however way, because I'm incredibly open to how that will happen as well. But there's those big questions that you hold when you're a female performer in this business, where your body is your job and your body is everything. And I will fight to go out pregnant on stage. I don't know how far I'm going to get. But
I've seen that before, actually.
It happens. It can happen.
Yeah.
So that I hope that turns up in my future. But I really, for me, want to continue to be a part of a transformation that I think this business is going through, and that I think is the most important thing of the rest of our generation, is to give voice to all of the different ills and wrongs that we see going in and around this circus environment, my acrobatic gymnastics environment, and to stay on the pulse of that. Because, for me, I've been dealing with many of these things for like over a decade. So for me, I've always understood there's like long games to justice. You don't get things that are long lasting, usually instantly. It takes time to put down roots, and then to, nurture them and see them rise for those next generations. So I'm very cognizant of making it so that whoever is coming behind me, or just younger than me right now in this field and in a lot of fields, to have things much better than I had them. I don't want anyone, any circus performer, any artist, any acrobat, to experience the same things that I experienced. And I also would not like to experience those same things going back out into the world now. Right. Because I still intend, of course, to perform. And I don't know how that's going to look post this pandemic. I am staying creative. I am staying innovative. I am doing a lot of coaching in the way that I've always wanted to, that I wasn't able to do before. I have my
awesome podcast. Live Like an Acrobat. I love your podcast.
Thank you. I have a podcast I've always wanted to do. I'm going to continue to grow with that. I have a lot of other kind of like visionary projects that I'm, kind of like have in theory, that I'm going to see how I can, kind of put those down. And then I'm looking into some collaborations with other artists, and I'm very curious to see what shape those are going to take as well. But continuing to grow and expand, but in the direction where it matters and that it means something. Because I just think that there's no point in doing things unless they're going very, very deep, and unless you are coming from a space of I would say, radical optimism, but also a certain level of seriousness that I think is necessary. I think it's very much time for people to, and the global pause and all of this is doing this, but not to forget those things when everything moves forward, not to just fall back into the ease of what we were used to before, and the superficiality of even this business, and just gunning for the same things in the same old ways. For all of us, of color, you know, a lot of times in many spaces and ways, our lives depend on these changes. Our careers depend on these changes happening.
Amen to
Moving
that.
forward.
Amen to
So they can't just be these, you know, just
that.
these,
Business as usual.
yeah, business as usual and same old, same old. I definitely am very adverse to that.
Well, on that note, I want to imagine that there's someone watching you, you know, and I can imagine a performer of your depth, of your accomplishment. I'm sure it goes through your mind, especially when you're the only one in many spaces. And I think it's a measure of strength too, and inspiration we get, that there's that one who actually is you, but smaller, younger. They're looking at you and you're doing it for them. Because you may not have, you likely didn't have that in that space. And quite frankly, with your confidence, you didn't need it. But, you know, so many of us do. And I would love to set up this very Barbara Walterish scenario. So there's a wonderful, beautiful black girl out there in the audience. And she's looking on stage and she sees you. What do you want her to know?
I want her.
I'm getting pretty good at this stuff.
You're amazing at this, Jonathan. Like, you know that I could just sit here and just like listen and talk about you all day because
no, please,
you give us hope. You give me hope. You give me joy. You give me everything. You know, you give us all strength. You singing and I don't sing. You are it, you know, like I thank God, because my goodness, going through all of this with you, you're just such a light. It's so amazing. And that is such a beautiful question. And for me, I would tell her that she is unlimited. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have to be like anybody else. And that's what her superpower is. Don't listen to what anybody says about you. Don't say it. Don't let them hijack your spirit. Don't let them hijack your consciousness, and don't let them hijack your dreams and where you think that you're going. And that more than dreams, focus on the reality of the situations and experiences and expressions that you're going to have in your life, because those will be very interesting and different imaginings. And that if somebody had told me focusing on that more, about the ins and outs, or about the little things going on in situations, I want to tell her that it would have spared me and saved me from a lot of emotional exhaustion and a lot of trauma. And I want to tell her that she is beautiful the way that she is. She does not have to change anything about who she is. And that the things that are the most unique about her are going to be the things that get her the farthest in her life, and are not the things that people are telling her are going to hold her back, are actually the things that are going to get her all the fulfillment that she's looking for, and that she matters, and that she's lovable, and that she's just like everybody else, and that she has the right to be uplifted and the right to just be who she needs to be. That she does not even have to feel like she needs to be a martyr in any space or situation to save others, that saving herself is more than enough.
Amen. That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And by you doing that, it's going to change the situation scenario anyway, but first and foremost, because you can't do for others unless you start here. And the biggest thing for her is just don't let them tell you about you.
You know what? Shenea, you are a champion, you're a warrior, you're my heroine. And now, I mean, if you thought I was a fan before, wait till you look at your DMs. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I tell you, this has been just pure magic and joy, but you are magical. You're magical. You're wonderful. Thank you so much. Shenea, Stiletto. Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you for coming.
The Black experience in circuses go back hundreds of years, and we do it with our own style. The circus has been a microcosm of the outside world. Many of the same prejudices that you see in the outside world are present in the circus.
So it's moving past the vision or the limited vision that the society has for you and stepping into the talent and skill that you know you have to go forward as a performer.
The circus is a vast international community, and there's only one place to connect for jobs, events, the latest news, and so much more. CircusTalk.com. Join today.